Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Wednesday, February 27th, 2019. And today we're going to talk all about the London Mulligan. So currently, we use what is known as the Paris Mulligan. And how that works, you draw 7 cards, you don't like them, you throw it back. You draw 6 cards, you don't like them, you throw it back, you draw 5, and so on and so forth, until you draw a hand that you're willing to keep. Once you have determined that you will keep your hand, you scry 1. And of course, scry is you look at the top card of your library and you decide to either leave it on top of your library or move it to the bottom. Now, way back in the day, when we used to ride dinosaurs to our LGSs uphill both ways in the blizzard, 15 miles each way, snow all year round, you could only mulligan if you had all lands or no lands. You did get to draw 7, but you could be stuck with 1 land and a handful of 5-drops, or 6 lands and, a 1-drop. Somewhere along the way, we got the mulligans where you just remove a card each time. And, it was like that for a while, and then we got the Paris Mulligan. Now, I generally felt that the Paris Mulligan was a substantial improvement to the mulligan rules, and made mulliganing, is that a verb? I guess. Made taking mulligans much less painful. It's still painful, but it's not as bad as the blind mulligan. So here's what the London Mulligan is based on my understanding. So you draw your opening 7. You don't like it. You toss it back, redraw 7. And then, you keep doing this until you have a hand that you like. But you keep track of how many times you do this. Because when you have a hand that you like, you put X cards on the bottom of your library, where X is equal to the number of mulligans you have taken. Please don't hit my car, Mr. Bus. There we go. I'll just back on out your way. So, if, say, you mulligan twice, that means you're going to put 2 cards on the bottom of your deck of your choice, and you're going to end up with a 5-card hand. Okay, so I'm sure if you were here yesterday and heard me mention that this is what I was going to talk about today, you got the impression that I am not a fan of this. I'm not, at face value. However, I do observe that it is the knee-jerk reaction of most Magic players for pretty much every time WotC says, hey, we're going to change something, for us all to go, fuck that, we don't like change. I see potential problems with this and a potential for abuse. Variance is a part of Magic. It kind of needs to be a part of Magic. I've talked about before how every deck has bad matchups. So when you remove variance from the equation, you kind of get to the point where you don't even really have to play around anymore. You sit down, what are you on? Oh, this is what I'm on. Okay, let's roll to see who gets play or draw. Oh, I'm stuck on the draw in this matchup. I lost. Now, when you remove variance, it does become more about skill, I guess. In that, now in your rough matchups, you have to do everything correct and hope that your opponent does a couple of things not correct. I know, as somebody who's bitched about being on the bad end of variance multiple times, because it seems to happen fairly frequently, you would think that I'd be a fan of removing variance from the game. No. It needs to be there. It is a part of the game. If we weren't into variance, we'd all play chess. I mean, because you figure, chess never changes. Rules are always the exact same. The pieces all move in the same way. So, variance needs to be there. I don't know. It's just part of the game. So, reducing variance when it comes to mulliganing, okay, I can get behind some measures to make mulligans less painful. You have seen non-games on coverage, I think a couple times recently. Well, prior to the ban of KCI, you actually saw them a fair amount of the time. But, there was the kind of non-game LSV had, I want to say it was like top 8 of the Pro Tour. It might have even been like the finals. And, he just mulliganed to oblivion. And it was a key game in the match. And just got rompa-stomped. And it sucks when it happens. And it is very anticlimactic. It is, I would say, only slightly better than seeing a match determined by a judge call. As in your sleeves aren't fully opaque and you play Search for his Canto, and for some godforsaken reason don't use the goddamn proxy card. Look, I 100% recommend when you're using flip cards to just use the damn proxy cards. I mean, unless you are 1000% certain that your sleeves are fully opaque. And that means if you hold the card up to the light in the sleeve, you should not see light around the edge of the card. That would be my barometer for this sleeve is opaque enough. That's just me. Oh, somebody's gonna have a bad day. Your cop sitting in traffic and just whipped his lights and siren on. I'm sorry, there. I should not. I'm working on that. I really am. But I do still screw up every once in a while. Anyway, just moving right along. I definitely have concerns, not necessarily about decks currently in, say, the modern meta. In Standard, I am much less concerned about this mulligan procedure because the card depth of Standard is so shallow. I think you'd have to work pretty hard to exploit this. And at that point, it's more of like a saffron olive against the odds deck than a real advantage. It's like, oh yeah, I built this deck to exploit the London Mulligan. I think at that point, you have put so much effort into that, your deck is probably garbage. Like, I'm sorry. But Modern is a bit of a different animal because of this vast card depth. And when you are kind of the point where you're like, all right, I need one land, this card, and that card. Well, now we've just made it so very much easier. Like, can you imagine KCI still being legal with the London Mulligan? Because based on my understanding of KCI, which I'll admit is very, very loose, I didn't get to watch very many matches of KCI, and the ones that I did, you just see the KCI player start to do shit and their opponent, scoop up their cards. You didn't really get to see how KCI works. But based on my understanding of KCI, the problem with that deck is it was so incredibly consistent, and, it just needed a few pieces to get its engine going. And once the engine got going, it was near unstoppable. So, how many pieces was it? Was it 2, 3, 4? When you are now giving players the ability to essentially sculpt their hand Well, now it becomes much less painful to say, no, I'm going to keep going for it. Or even like sideboard cards. Like if I'm playing against Dredge, I have 3 cards in my sideboard that are a good inclusion against Dredge. 2 Grafdigger's Cages and an On-Offensa. Grafdigger's Cage better than On-Offensa. So now, as a Humans player, I played against Dredge. I've lost Dredge. So, but I wasn't really willing to mulligan down the sideboard cards. I was willing to keep a reasonable starting hand that looked fast enough that I could at least compete with Dredge and hope to draw into the sideboard games while I was holding them back, or sideboard cards while I was holding them back. Well, now, if I can mulligan to 4 and still draw 7 and decide what 4 to keep, well, I'm going to keep Land Grafdigger's Cage. Like, I'm going to keep going until I have a hand that has a land that's not Ancient Ziggurat, that's important, and Grafdigger's Cage. And that's why this rule concerns me. I think it's kind of a double-edged thing that they're debuting it at a modern, I believe it's Mythic Championship in London. Like, okay, you've decided to go straight on balls to the wall here. Because the only format it's potentially more broken in is Legacy, of course. But Legacy outside of team events, there's not a whole lot of support for it. So, if you're going to debut this, okay, cool. I definitely appreciate the gusto going straight for the format that, has a lot of potential to exploit it. However, if it is exploited, if it doesn't work out, it's going to make for a kind of shitty viewing experience and a kind of shitty playing experience. Now, again, I'm not terribly worried. Like, tomorrow, 1 p.m., twitch.tv/SCG Tour, they're doing Versus Live, and they have mentioned that they're going to be doing Modern, and they're going to be testing the London Mulligan. Which is cool. I'm excited, and I'll probably talk about, the results on that tomorrow, depending on how much of it I get to watch or listen to, because, tomorrow's chock full of crap I gotta do. But even if I don't get to really tune into it much live, they always do the rerun around 5 p.m. Plus, I think the VOD stays up. So in any case, they're going to try it out, and I'm kind of excited to see that. And when they were talking about it, Ross Merriam's like, I'm on Dredge. Like, I'm just going to play Dredge. So he seems to think that Dredge can get a nice advantage from this. I don't play Dredge. I only kind of understand Dredge. I understand Dredge more than I understood KCI. But I'm looking at it going, yeah, I can see, there's certain things you definitely want in Dredge. Like, you want a Faithless Looting and a Dredger in your opening hand. Obviously. You want to not have Narcomoebas in your opening hand, ever. So, okay, he's looking at Dredge saying, this is a deck I immediately see being a problem with this. Again, I'm not terribly worried about the decks currently in the Modern format, as, I'm not seeing any, off the top of my head that I see as being particularly abusive of this rule. I'm more concerned about what somebody's going to come up with, because we've talked about this before. When you put something out there that's exploitable, a Magic player somewhere will find a way to exploit it. And again, like, we observe variance as part of the game because we have a deck minimum. If variance was not intended to be part of the game, there would be no deck minimum. It'd be like, yeah, how many cards do you think you need to win? Why does Control run so many fucking cantrips to get what they're looking for? Why is Jace the Mind Sculptor considered to be, one of the best planeswalkers? Because he has an ability that gives you an opportunity to sculpt your draws. That's why Brainstorm is such, a great effect. Is because it gives you an ability, like, it's better than just regular scry, in that you get to put 3 cards into your hand, and then, what is it, you put 2 back on top? I think it's 2. I don't think you put 3 back. But you get to take those cards into your hand, so if you have dead cards in your hand, you get to put them back, and especially in a format with things like fetch lands, then you get to shuffle your deck if you don't want those cards. And now this isn't quite the same, like we've discussed in my LGS before. What if they changed it so that you got to scry X, where X is equal to the number of mulligans you've taken? That would definitely be more broken, in my opinion. Because now you've gotten to sculpt the top of your deck. And when you're like, this hand is fantastic if I draw 1 more land. Even if your top 3 cards aren't a land, the odds of one of your top 4 not being a land are, pretty astronomical. So the ability, or, conversely, if you're like, this hand's going to be great if I draw nothing but gas. Well, now you take the top 3 cards of your library, and if any of them are lands, you just chuck them on the bottom. So this is a little different in that you do not have the opportunity to put anything on top of your deck. The cards that you get rid of, you're putting on the bottom. And yeah, Modern's full of fetch lands and shuffle effects that will allow you to shuffle your deck to mix them back in, but you can't say, all right, well, I'm going to keep these 4 in the hand, and my first draw is going to be this one, and my second draw is going to be this one, and then this card I don't care about, so that's just going on the bottom, because I don't want this for a while, and I'll be able to fix it with fetch lands. So that's the big concern I have. I do have some concerns about the decks in the format. Like,
incoming call rejected.
Used to be in best of 5 matches, after game 1, they sideboarded. Now, if you've been watching coverage more recently and seen best of 5 matches, you'll notice that they don't sideboard now until after game 2. It was because sideboard cards can be so potent that, one player, again, is pretty much locked out of the match. So they decided to kind of even those odds a little bit more. So the player that, say, pre-sideboard is in a really bad matchup, you now have 3 opportunities, which you need to win 3 games to win the match, to recoup that loss. And the player that, say, is really good pre-board, but the underdog post-board, well, now you only have to take 1 of those 3 games instead of 2 of 4. So, again, I definitely have concerns about this. At face value, when I first heard it, I was like, this is the stupidest shit ever. Why would they do this? And I backed off that a little bit, and I'm trying to keep an open mind. But I don't even think testing with the current decks in the meta, like, say, at, the Modern event. Now, they have announced that they're doing this, so players in that event do have an opportunity to kind of try to come up with a way to use this to their best advantage. But I have concerns that even if with the current decks in the meta, we look at it and go, it's really not that bad. How long before decks start springing up specifically to abuse this mechanic? And then do they say, okay, our bad. We realize now that we shifted things in such a way that allow players to use this mechanic to their advantage as opposed to make mulligans less of a disadvantage. Do they revert it, or do they start banning cards that enable that? And, where does that rabbit hole go if it ever shows up? So I'm not saying it will. I'm saying I have concerns that it will. So for now, it's kind of a wait and see. I do like them trying new things in the game. I do like them trying to, make sure that players are having the best play experience they can. But there comes a point where you have to kind of get concerned that they're, quote unquote, dumbing the game down too much. There are a lot of World of Warcraft players. Now, I never really played WoW because I could never get into it. But a lot of World of Warcraft players complain that as the game aged to appeal to a larger audience, they really dumbed down the rules and, they put it on easy mode. And so suddenly it's not this, fun, exciting, challenging game. It's easy mode. And I don't really want to see that happen to Magic. So, again, for now, we're withholding judgment and kind of taking a wait and see. I definitely recommend tuning into the Versus series. Not only because they're testing this new rule tomorrow, but, I'm an SCG fangirl, so I always recommend tuning into the Versus series. But all that being said, I'm in the driveway now, so I gotta go. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.